Hello everyone, I'm back. I'm Eire from Saturn's Edge, and you're watching more Persona 3 Reload. In the last episode, I talked a lot. Like, a lot. It was insane. Luckily, caffeine doesn't have as much of an effect on me in this episode, so we're good there. Moving on from that, we learned a lot about social links. We learned about some free time stuff, we delved into Tartarus a bit deeper, and we got to learn more about Tartarus and how it operates. On top of that, now I'm able to talk more freely during these, because now I feel more out of my shell than ever. So, I believe that this episode is going to be the episode where I have little to no dead air, which is a really nice thing to have. Starting things off right, the item that we just got from that chest that required some Twilight Fragments to open, that is a really nice bow that I would love to have. Now, you saw the stats earlier, the accuracy is down by 6 points, but it does a bit more damage, and it has a very special effect. A chance of poisoning the enemy, a medium chance, which is, it's not great, but it's also not terrible. Putting that on Yukari means that I have a solid chance at ending battles quicker. Either through brute forcing it with the pure strength that shooting a bow at point blank has, or through poisoning over time, which is just really nice. And just up ahead, we get introduced to something really nice. This is a rare shadow, and if I see something shiny in a game, that means it's good. What I can assume from it is that we get a lot of rewards from beating it. And I'm right. If it looks like gold and it shines like gold, then it's probably gold. If it runs away, it's definitely worth more than gold. So now we gotta figure out exactly what rewards this thing has. And just like any game with a rare creature, you're gonna want to beat it and rob it. And make sure it's preferably done in the most violent possible way. Hunt it like a wild animal and then just stab it in an alleyway, leaving it for dead and then taking all of its money out of the wallet. I don't know, do something. And like many of the other shadows in this game, the rare shadow types are very specific. They all take the form of hands, and this one specifically is the wealth hand. The weakest, and arguably the cheapest, of all of them. But remember, just because the wallet is small doesn't mean that you shouldn't take it all. I might be rhyming like Dr. Seuss, but this wealth hand is gonna be cooked like a goose. And because I don't know any of its weaknesses currently, I'm just going to use literally any power I have to put it down, until I can eventually find the correct one that will make it fall over. Usually, rare shadows like the wealth hands, or really any hand, has very little to no weaknesses, and it's really hard to figure out if they have them or not. In some cases, you can't even find a weakness for them, and you have to instead rely on your luck to get a critical hit in. Is it a little bit dumb? A little bit, but frankly, I find it interesting that the rare shadows, having no weaknesses, or at least little to no weaknesses at all, actually rely on you to be lucky to both find them and defeat them. On top of that, it really brings out a challenge, because if you really want the money, you can't cheese the fight anymore by just using the weakness and then leaving. That's just a really cool and genuinely nice function in the Rare Shadows design, in the gameplay, really. I know that I talk a lot and I kind of ramble when I'm doing these voice clips and the recordings for this, but I really mean to say that I like the application of various enemies and items into the combat system. Something like the Rare Shadow or certain items just really throw things for a loop and allow you to really have to do your best to actually beat them, or find some way around a weakness that your party format, your setup, has. Like, for example, because I don't have Pixie leveled up, I don't have access to Zeo, the electric type move. And so my party's current weakness is that I have no electric moves. And the way around this is to use an item that happens to have electrical properties to do damage for me. Another weakness in my current party is that right now Junpei is currently frozen, which is the status effect. I don't have anything that could cure that. I don't have any moves for that. So there's items to help solve that problem. I like that there's alternatives for the various issues that I have and that there are items for them, but having those moves is much more convenient and easier on me as the player and my entire party setup. all I'd have to do is just click a few buttons, and there it is, there's the move in the list. Unlike going through my entire bag to figure out where the item that solves this problem is. I am a guy that really likes it when something is convenient for me when I'm playing a game. I do like the need to manage things, like my inventory, right? But when it's convenient for me, like having access to the move that could solve this problem, or having a balanced party so I could do certain different types of damage, that really helps, and it makes me a lot more aware of what my party can do rather than what I have currently in the bag. The bag is a very limited thing. It only can hold, you know, like, sure, I can have like 30 of a certain item, right? And I can have more than that, but I can't rely on it every time. And it's the same with the SP pool that all of the characters had. But because now I'm more aware of the characters, I'm always checking the SP bars to make sure they're high enough to actually do the moves that I want them to do, rather than relying on the bag all the time. And that's not even considering the amount of power that the characters have compared to what the items can have. Items, for example, can have set chances of things, or set numbers of things. For example, let's say there's a healing skill, right? That healing skill on a party member could be like a random amount because of the way the math is done in the coding. But when it comes to items, there is a direct amount that is listed every time. A healing item can only heal 20, but your healing skill could potentially heal even more than that. And so you're willing to sacrifice SP for something that does more, rather than one turn for something that does a lot less. When I'm playing an RPG, I also like to consider, like, the internal math that the game doesn't tell you almost ever. Because it's not going to show how it operates, you're just going to know by playing the game that this will do more than this. I like that internal math because it's kind of like a hidden factor that you have to work around. I am very much a numbers guy. I love math, and I love doing it because it's very set in stone. It's not like science where it relies on theoreticals, it's not like history where it relies on the past, it's not like English which relies on the reader's interpretation. It is a very solid fact that you can easily look at and solve. I'm sorry to all the other fans of different subjects that aren't math because math is boring, but the clear winner here is math because it's just easy compared to the rest of them. And also, when I say math, I mean math, okay? I mean regular math, I mean algebra, I mean geometry. Not that calculus garbage that is more numbers. It's not more numbers, it's more letters and symbols than it is numbers. The whole point of math is to have numbers, and if you have, like, a section of math that just doesn't have numbers, what's the point in even doing it? You probably didn't want to listen to my rant that made me sound like a complete idiot, but it's true, I'm kind of an idiot. I'm just an idiot that happens to like math a lot more than I do other subjects. Is it counterintuitive? Yes. Is it ironic? Also yes. But can a man like things more than just, like, art and music and writing and stuff like that, and, like, focus his attention to, like, math? Of course he can. Math is great. Alright, now my propaganda about math is over. We could focus on something real, like this game! The thing we're going to be focusing on is this new enemy that we have here, that we have seen earlier, but I didn't mention because I was in the middle of a rant. These are the Trance Twins. This enemy is actually unique because of its different appearance. It has a humanoid form, two of them actually, connected to these steel spikes, I think? I don't know how to describe it, but basically it's kind of like a 2-in-1 enemy, even though the enemy is one thing, and it's also like all of its abilities are just its own. It's a little confusing, I'll admit. Basically, they're cuffed together. Now, these are under the Twins type. And there's, you know, multiple different variations of this, but these fall under the Hierophant Arcana, which is a different Arcana than what we've seen before with the past enemies. The primary one to note is that the Magic Hand falls under the Magician Arcana, so it's nice seeing something that's a bit different. And we're going to see a lot of different enemies as we go on here. I've stated this before, but there's a ton of variation in the enemies, both in name, types, what Arcana they fall under. It's a really interesting look at things, really. And if you just saw Yukari's very special animation there that was pretty flashy, but also kind of weak, that right there is a critical hit animation. Every character gets their own critical hit animation, and it looks cool, it seems cool, and it will always knock the enemy down on the ground. So it counts as a chance for a one more to happen. Which, as you know, has the potential to turn into an all-out attack, which is really nice. Especially when you're dealing with enemies that you don't have the weakness for. I wanted to note something interesting here. You saw that instead of choosing the XP option or the money option, I chose a persona that I already own, being Silky. Whenever I choose a persona that I already own, it actually gets transferred into experience points, but specifically for any persona in your party that falls under the same family. So in this case, that would be the Lover's Arcana. And, if you noticed, Pixie falls under the Lover's Arcana, which means that thanks to that EXP bonus and the fact that I haven't used Pixie almost ever, granted them 2 level-ups, which now gives them the skill that my party was lacking, an electricity-type attacking move being Zeo. This coverage is now officially going to help my team. I have Junpei, who can cover fire skills. I have Yukari, who can cover wind. Thanks to my persona setup, I do have ones that can cover ice, and now, thanks to Pixie, electricity-type skills. I can now officially cover the core 4 magic-type moves. When it comes to the 3 physical ones, being piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning, you know, the fist, I am able to cover those, but not as well. Mainly because Junpei and I share basic slashing-type attacks, while Yukari covers the piercing one. Both Junpei and Minato are able to then have their bludgeoning-type moves on their personas, which will cost health to use. Deviating from my type coverage, I'm going to briefly talk about this enemy. This is the Grave Beetle, and it falls under the Emperor Arcana. Note the amount of beetles that we will see in the future. Back to the main topic here, we also have a list of support skills that we can choose from. Ones that can heal us, ones that can boost our stats, ones that can inflict the enemy with status conditions. Those are all 3 pretty nice, and we have those on a nice blend between Yukari and Minato. The other thing to note is, well, really, just any passive skills. You may have noticed on Nekomata, there is a skill that doesn't show up whenever I'm attacking with them. This is the ability to, basically just nullify distress. That means if someone tried to inflict distress on my character while they were holding Nekomata as their persona, that means that effect would never take in place. Ever. But the catch with it is that that persona, Nekomata, has to be out in my party, the one that I'm using to be attacked with. But you may be wondering something, right? What about the final 2 elements that we know of from the charts? The light and dark, the curse and bless, right? Simply put, those are kind of mid to late game types. And they don't really fit in anywhere in the general scheme of things. I'd have to say that those types of moves work pretty differently from all the other types. And I'll talk more about them whenever we actually get to a section where I can talk about both of them at the same time, as the 2 work similar to each other rather than the rest of the other types. And there will be, I think, 1 other type of move, potentially 2, that I will have to talk about a bit more in depth. And those 2 are going to be way later on, whenever we actually have access to that sort of thing. As you just saw, earlier I used one of those Mazio gems, the one that hits all the enemies with electric-type damage, and that actually is the weakness. That electricity is the weakness to the Trance Twins. So, this gives me reason to actually use Pixie during those fights with that specific enemy. Finally, I'm learning! I will say, though, that battle was a bit tough because, as you can see, I'm very low on SP. So much so that I can't even cast moves. Now we can get into, like, the real personal management when it comes to SP specifically. Sure, we know that health is health. We know that HP is very valuable. It's what keeps you alive during the fight. But SP is, I'm gonna say it, I think it's more important than health. It really is. Sure, you can spend some health to cast certain moves, but really, most moves, most spells and stuff, are done through SP. And if you're out of SP, you're only left with physical attacks and items. Items are very limited, as we've covered, and physical attacks are extremely limited, and you'd be lucky to get a crit in at the right time that you want it to happen. With the spells, at least, you have type advantages and different effects coming into play, and even healing. SP, in my personal opinion, is so much more important than HP, because it's what allows you to do more in a fight, so that way you can do more fights later. And to really top it off, to really add more onto why SP is important, HP recovery items are everywhere, and there are spells that you can use to recover HP. SP has no recovery options, little to none. There are certain items, but they barely recover enough for you to get by. You'd be lucky to have those, and to just save them and stockpile them for when you needed them, because you're always going to need them. And when it comes to, like, recovery through spells and stuff, that doesn't exist. Because if you did that, you'd be spending SP to get back SP, or you'd be spending life, HP, for more SP, which can't function correctly. And it doesn't exist in this game. And to add on top of that, some SP recovery comes in the form of equipable items. So in some cases, you're sacrificing defense to either get a higher max SP, or to be able to recover SP after or during fights. And that's if that gear even has that, because it's such a rare and, like, hard to get attribute to a piece of gear. It's tied to specific ones. And most gear is just focused on defense. You're always going to want higher defense so you can live. And speaking of the equipables, some of them don't even provide defense. Those are the charms. Some charms are objectively better than the SP ones, because they focus on the strongest areas of that character. You would want someone like Yukari, who has wind skills and healing spells and stuff like that, to be able to do more damage when it comes to wind-based attacks, or something. So you'd want to focus on that rather than something like SP, like having a max amount of it. This is why I love RPGs, especially ones that actually have limited amounts of certain things, like magic or SP, in most games. This is why Pokemon has power points for all of the moves. I like that sort of attention to that detail where it's limited, so you have to focus on something else that just isn't HP. I think that Pokemon fails with that because most of the time you're looking at hit points, because that's what matters, but something like Persona thrives on magic management rather than health management. It just feels better this way. It makes it so that it's not about how long you can last, it's about how far you can actually go with the energy you have. I feel it's more accurate to real life to say that we're less focused on, like, our personal health or our physical strength, and we are more focused on our physical and mental endurance to get through something. It really does matter, like, hey, how much can you lift? But it also matters just as much to say, how long can you hold this weight? That's the part I like about Persona, is being able to do that, especially with one simple magic system. I know I've been talking a lot during this episode, mainly talking about, like, in-game systems or, like, my personal self, just about random things like math. But it's a chance for me to open up, and also for me to just keep talking. I really want to make it so that this episode has little to no dead air, because, mainly because I just don't like it when it's quiet. I like being able to talk like this, but also whenever I have to review my entire episode, just in post, after I'm done recording all these voice lines, anytime that there's dead air, I'm just immediately, like, bored out of my mind. And I feel bad for people that have to sit through that, because it just feels awful. I feel bad either way. You either have to listen to me talk, or you have to just listen to complete silence the whole time while the game is going on. And either way, it's not good for anyone. I know I'm kind of, not talking great about myself, but mainly the point is to say that, like, I'd prefer to talk the whole time, or at least have, like, very small gaps where you can just focus on the game, rather than a large gap like the 10-minute gap in the last episode, or the massive gaps in, like, the first 2 episodes. Talking like this is just really good for me in general, and it's really helpful, I think, for the recording of the episode. Taking a break from that topic for a bit, I'm going to talk about the new persona that we just got, Eire Mitama. Eire Mitama is one of the 4 aspects of Shinto thought. It has the power to grant ferocity, and it is said to aid in one's bravery, growth, and endeavors, though it can lead in a negative direction. So now you may be wondering, Eire, what were all those words that you just said? We're gonna slow it down just a little bit. First off, Shinto is actually a Japanese religion, more specifically an East Asian religion. And there is it's a polytheistic belief, so multiple gods, and they're all called kami. This specific persona, Mitama, refers to the spirit of a kami, of a god, or the soul of a dead person. And so, what it's saying here is that, in this case, this is one of those 4 spirits. And it's kind of like a system that you can live by, this sort of belief. Now, because there are 4 of them, we can actually expect all 4 of these personas to show up in-game. I will get to them when I get to them, and there's no guarantee that all 4 of them will show up, as I haven't checked through the full list yet. What is interesting about Eire Mitama is rather the translation and various other notes about it. It translates directly to Wild Spirit, and you can tell from its description that it carries over perfectly. It is a dynamic, or rough and violent side of a spirit. A kami's first appearance is always going to be an Eire Mitama, which must be pacified with appropriate pacification rites and worship so that the Nigi Mitama can appear. Now, I will get to that when I can eventually get that persona, but it's a nice little running thing that we have here where we can actually, like, chain these personas together. Like, they're all connected in some form. Eire Mitama is a part of the Chariot Arcana, which is actually one of our first personas of the Chariot Arcana, and it will really help us build our relationship and our social link with the track team and Kaz. The other thing that I want to talk about here is, well, we gotta figure out what Eire Mitama is actually good at. What makes Eire Mitama seem interesting to me is that they aren't all based in offensive attack skills, like, for example, like Bash or Strike, or any of these other moves that are either physical or magical. Instead, it relies more on stat changes, specifically buffing up your attack for you or your party members. And also, it focuses on inflicting the enemy with a rage, which is a status effect that hasn't come up yet. This is really interesting, as most, like, wild or angry sorts of characters in games typically have more attacking options. But instead, now you're making it so that its only options are support skills, with some attack options. This is really cool, actually, and it feels more clean and more varied, unique in a way. I like this because it sticks very close with the source material. I still have more to talk about, but not about Eire Mitama, but rather about the in-game system that I would like to call the stock. The persona stock is actually pretty interesting. Basically, your main character, having the ability to switch between personas, has a limited amount that they can switch between. They can't freely pick from, like, every persona in the game, because that'd be broken. They can only select however many that they are allowed to at that current moment, and they need to level up either in their social link or in their actual levels to increase that stock. So right now, we have a very limited stock to work with, meaning that if our stock is full and we want to get a new persona, like Eire Mitama, we need to replace one of our old personas. The problem with this is it doesn't allow you to register like your personas at the time that you do it. So now it's a balance of like, hey, can I find some time to register the personas before I go picking up new ones and leveling those up? Do I have to keep going through this so I can get more levels to eventually increase my stock a bit more? There's a lot of like little different difficulties with this, really. And it's kind of a neat thing to balance, especially if you're wanting to collect new personas that have unique abilities to help balance your party, or just stuff that you think looks cool, because in a way, like, you're more likely to keep stuff that you think looks cool to you. For example, I find the design, like the actual design, of Auramatama to be kind of boring, even though it is, you know, accurate to the source material, or, you know, a unique design that I haven't seen in a lot of fiction. I am more likely to have a persona like Orpheus because the design stands out more to me, so it looks cooler. But if I was more logical in the way things were going, I'd want Auramatama over Orpheus because of various things like stats, abilities, skills, and it's kind of like a unique balance of trying to figure out, like, how I want to play the game. Do I want to play it in the way that's efficient and more logical, or do I want to play it in the way that feels more like me? Like, the one that makes me feel like I'm kind of there making the actual choices for these things. I like this sense of player agency on a more personal level. Rather than picking out weapons at the shop where I look at the stats, or picking out my party members that come with me based on when they're available or not, or also, like, what types work during certain sections. I like the more personal level, like the Persona stock, because it feels more like I have a choice, like I'm more intertwined. This is how I think the character would have these things. I like that, I mean, I said player agency, but I just like the choice that it gives you, the freedom, or at least the illusion of freedom in a way. And right on time, it looks like we have another difficult fight coming up. I will be, seeing what we can do about this one. I kinda don't remember this fight at all, honestly, in post-recording. I remember the design a bit more than I do the actual fight, so, you're probably gonna get a bit of a more confused and fresh reaction out of me than you have with the last ones. Also, we've been properly introduced to this system, specifically the clock. The clock in the lobby is it's as simple as this. You put 7 Twilight Fragments in, and you get healed both in health and SP. It's as simple as that. Is it worth the 7? Honestly, I have no idea yet, because you don't really need it for the early game, and you're better off spending your Twilight Fragments on rare items than healing up, because you could always come back the next day and you're gonna be healed up completely. I only really use these, like, healing systems if I actually need them in games. Like, for example, you know, health is low, right, but, like, I'm on a roll, I'm on a grind, right? If I feel like I'm doing that, then I'll definitely think it's worth it, because I want to keep going. But at the same time, I mean, I'm in the early game, I'm at the start of the game, I don't need something like this just yet, but it's good to know that the option is there, and I like it when it's provided to me. Anyways, on to the cool new enemy that we have in front of us. This is called the Swift Axle. Here's the problem though. When I tried to do research on this, a different name came up, but that different name is also technically correct. This different name is called the Wild Drive. This is that specific variation. It's of the Drive subtype, and they're all under the Chariot Arcana, much like the Beast Wheel that we saw earlier. It's actually pretty interesting that the name is this different, and I've been wondering why for a quick second now. So I decided to do more research, and upon, like, closer inspection, here's where it gets interesting. A lot of the other shadows that we fought earlier on these, like, tougher fight floors carry the same names as other, like, enemies. It's pretty much the same. For some reason, this is the one that's different, and I don't know why. Mainly, I think they wanted it to stand out as this is, like, one of the more unique designs that you've seen in the early game, and also, whenever you see it later on, it's gonna be more attuned to your level and not as difficult. Maybe it's something like that, I'm not sure. But, frankly, it's kind of interesting that they changed up the name specifically for this fight on this floor. Something interesting to note is that, much like the wheel, the drive, or in this case the axle, is in the same family of the Chariot Arcana. Now, what makes this interesting is that these are both mobility-based, or like very robotic shadows, and I like that. Axles typically, you know, refer to wheels, and you know how they rotate, and if you notice, its arms rotate at the same speed, meaning that those two arms are on an axle inside the body, and that's where it gets this part of the name. But the drive part, in the other types of enemy names that are similar to this one, with the drive, it refers to, like, kind of how a car operates. I mean, you drive a car, but more so, like, how it drives into something. Like how a fast-moving object drills in. I only bring this up because it's a lot less obvious than something like the wheel, which we know is just a wheel. With this axle, or drive, it's a bit more of a... It's a bit more difficult and a bit more, like, brain-power to actually, like, look at and think, like, oh yeah, that's why it's named that. Other than the wheels, you're just like, yup, that's a wheel. Or with the ravens, same thing. It's a raven. The difference here is that, like, I kinda like this design for being this unique, especially in the early game, and for having, basically forcing me, in post-recording, to actually think about it and do more research about why it is the way it is. I love this thing. Also, quick shout out to Pixie for carrying that fight. Seriously, wow. I'm so glad I got Zio. That is, like, looking back at it, like, this was actually an intense fight. And I'm playing on normal difficulty, okay? And there's a big controversy about Persona 3 Reload's difficulty that I'll get into in just a minute. But as someone who occasionally has trouble playing these games because I'm just stupid sometimes, this was actually like a challenging fight, especially when I'm at low SP, about mid-range HP, and like, I just got a fresh skill and I'm still trying to learn some of the mechanics in this game. So what is the big controversy about Persona 3 Reload's difficulty that everyone has noticed whenever they've played this game compared to older iterations of this game, like the original, FES, Portable? What is the big deal? Well, I think it's kind of an interesting case. I would like to call this a change of the times. A lot of game developers now and companies know that their audiences are going to be younger, and so they actually try to make things not as difficult as they used to be, but at the same time they try to keep things difficult because the old fans would want it that way, and they feel like, hey, something needs to challenge you. So when it comes to Persona 3 Reload, why is that so controversial? Simply put, the older iterations of Persona were actually harder. But back then, that harder difficulty was the standard. That would be considered the average game. So, if you were playing that game back then and you played this new one now, it would actually seem that this one is a lot easier, and in your case, in some cases, like, just worse than the original, because the original would challenge you. Alternatively, you could be playing our modern-day standard with Persona 3 Reload, and go back to an older game, and it would seem a lot harder, because of the standard difference. It's really interesting to note that over time, games have gotten progressively easier and easier because certain systems were dropped out or put in, but also it comes from an understanding of like how old the audience is going to be playing this game. I really like this sort of timeline. A prime example of this is actually the Pokemon games. Those used to be kind of hard, actually. Specifically, Gen 1 is very slow and difficult to get through in some cases. But over time, it got easier and easier as they added more stuff. And it's pretty interesting to see it that way. So now this poses a big question. Which is better? A modern-day game that seems easier by comparison, or an older game that's a lot harder by comparison? My argument for this is that all of these games are still really good. It doesn't matter how hard or easy it is. It just matters that you're, like, having fun with it. And if you're having fun with it, keep enjoying it for as long as you can. Play it multiple times. But if you're not having fun with a game, then it's not really worth your time, I guess. It's kind of why, like, the whole difficulty argument doesn't exactly work, because so many people have fun in different ways. There's 8 billion people on the planet, and if we could say, like, I don't know, about 1 billion, right, a very large number, actually played games, like video games and stuff, then, like, surely out of that 1 billion, there's different forms of entertainment in that. Some people like competitive stuff, some people like that casual stuff, farming simulators. Point is, there's a lot of ways to enjoy games, and I don't think the difficulty argument needs to come up all that often. It's also why I kind of hate that, like, there are some, like, really old Pokemon fans that think the games need to be more difficult. Pokemon is targeted toward, like, you know, anyone ages, like, 8 and up. Like, between 8 and preteen is, like, the main demographic. And it's kind of always been that way. Even if they keep pandering to the old fans, that's still the way that they market Pokemon. It drives me a little insane, honestly. And this is coming from someone whose first Pokemon game is debatable, at best. My first proper Pokemon game that I've played is debatable because it's either I pirated it, or it's like the official game. My first official one that I played like a proper copy of would be Pokemon X, Gen 6, you know, the time that Pokemon would be a lot easier. But my first actual Pokemon game was Pokemon Emerald, Gen 3, a time when Pokemon was like a little bit difficult. But I'm gonna be honest, I keep playing through Emerald and it's easy. Pokemon Emerald is easy. And I'm pretty sure if I played any old Pokemon game, it would be easy. Because I've just grown up. So it's like, it's either you're really nostalgic for it, and it seemed difficult because you were 5, or you're like, or you're just like trying to hope that like that same difficulty you thought you had when you were 5 carries over when you're like 25, you know? It's just wild. Also, really quick, like, pause here, but Kenji asking this question is like the most awkward question I've been asked in my entire life in a video game. Okay? Like, I've heard some weird things in real life, some really weird things, but if we're talking games, games ask relatively tame questions. This is one of the more out-of-pocket ones, and even then, it's like still considered tame to what I've been asked in real life. Also, like, in reality, we've been sitting here for like 5 to 10 minutes just eating noodles, right? Who's just like, oh yeah, you know, it's a shame that, like, hey, you can't win them all, you know? Anyways, I'm more into older women. Like, who asks this? Like, especially the context of the question, I mean, like, just the setup for it. I don't think I've heard anyone actually do this exact setup. I'm sorry if I'm sounding, like, absolutely insane, but I'm kind of, like, baking in my room right now as I'm recording this audio. I feel like this doesn't need to be explained, but I'm just gonna, like, take a second to just delegate some time to it. If you are a student at school, do not have a crush on your teacher, okay? Like, I don't understand why media, like, has this interpretation of things. I don't understand why, like, real life, this happens. Like, look, I get it, you can have, like, fantasies and stuff like that, and, like, oh yeah, you know, they're a teacher, they can teach me things, I see them as, like, a mature figure, right? Don't. Simply don't. If you're a teenager, your brain is going through a really, like, confusing time, and you're literally in the scientific process where your brain kind of, like, melts. It's kind of like the situation where a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, where it, you know, it has the, like, it goes through that, what's that process called? The life cycle? Anyway, but point is, it's like, basically your brain is not functioning at all, and you're in the most confusing time of your life. Do not do this. Do not have this sort of idea ever, okay? It is just not healthy. I will say, though, the original was made back in 2006, it was made in Japan, so, like, hey, you know, there's that. But also, in writing, you can have these different things happen. You can have this sort of thing happen if it teaches a lesson correctly, and it's not, like, done in a horrible way. I will also give props to the voice actor for Kenji, because they actually, like, stated in a tweet, or in, like, a social media post, they were basically saying that not a lot of people liked the original Kenji, and so he'd do his best as the new Kenji to make him an actually likable character. And after this game was released and more people, like, did his social link again, they really enjoyed his new voice, they enjoyed the time with him, they made him a likable character. It's impressive. The voice actor clearly put in a lot of work to make Kenji feel like a person that you could actually hang out with legitimately and not be weirded out all the time by. Sorry for slapping you back to back to back with multiple things like social standards, how I literally don't remember what the life cycle is called, and also a genuine look at writing and social media. I'm sorry for that sort of, like that triple whammy, I guess, but I like the idea that I can ramble on and jump from topic to topic as it's happening in-game. It really feels more, natural to me, I guess.
What are you looking for?
Also, the main reason, dead air. I've said this a lot during this episode, and I've said it before a couple times, but, I've said why I don't like it, but there's, like, a history lesson to this. Back when I was, like, a really young kid, okay? My dad actually was the manager at, like, a radio station, okay? And it's pretty nice. Well, it was pretty nice, I should say. I actually learned a decent amount about radio back then, and I even recorded a couple spots, like promotions for various local businesses. And so one of the first lessons I learned is that, like, you can't have dead air for a certain amount of time because people are just gonna change off of your exact bandwidth. And it's like, it's kind of important to me to just not have a moment of silence when it comes to, like, videos or really, like, radio specifically. I think a moment of silence is, like, good in some cases, like, hey, listen to the music, or check this thing out, or whatever. And in conversations in real life, you need to have silence because that's just the way that pacing works. But when I'm making these videos, and I have this history, and I have this genuine opinion that, like, I hate the silence, having dead air anywhere in my video for, longer than a certain amount of time is just, like, it's just insane to me. That I hate it so much. And I'd prefer to just talk the whole time, to ramble on, to be, like, kind of an idiot when I'm doing these things. Another reason why I hate, like, the silence is mainly due to, like, COVID, because there was nothing happening. There were no events, there were no noise. And even if my family was around, right, we wouldn't make a lot of noise, so it's like, hearing something is that much more, like, surreal. And a general feeling of loneliness is, like, another reason, because if you're, like, alone and you don't hear anything, then you actually think that you're extremely alone. So if you play, like, a video in the background, you're gonna think that, like, hey, you know, like, there's something happening around me, clearly, like, I'm not alone, or, like, there's something going on. And that it really does help, me specifically, because I don't get out too often, and I'm not really close to any of my, friends currently, and I mean, like, physically, you know? It's a bit of a drive to get over to them. And sure, you know, I can, like, call people and whatnot, but it's not the same as, like, physically being there. It's also ironic as well because, you know, as you could tell from the way that I've been talking in all of these videos, and, like, you know, my voice, my tone, all this sort of junk, it's that I have some sort of, like, social, not, like, issues, but more, like, just minor hiccups, I guess. I am a bit introverted. I pretty much stay indoors all the time. And it's less of the fact that, like, I hate being around people, and it's more the fact that I just don't go around people. I do like talking to people, it's just that, like, it's so weirdly nerve-wracking to me that it's just kind of, it's just difficult at times, and that's why I prefer to be, like, alone in some cases. But it's really hard because you want to be alone, but you also want to have, like, noise around you and be able to talk to people. So it's always just been, like, a massive scale of figuring out how to balance that. I know I haven't been, like, focusing on the gameplay as much in this episode, but it's mainly because, like, we kinda understand the whole system. Tartarus is Tartarus, you battle there, you get EXP, we get all these places in our side time where we can advance social links or increase stats, like social stats, I mean. It's a pretty easy system to understand, and I know I skip through the text a lot when it comes to the workplaces, but when I actually work there, I will briefly discuss what it does, or, you know, something like that. I think overall it's just I think this episode is going to be less focused on the gameplay, as it's just like, hey, you know, we understand how things operate, and now we can just, like, focus on talking about whatever we feel like. And, I don't know, that's pretty freeing to me in a way, that I don't have to focus as much on the game in post-recording. And it's more just about me, like, being able to chat as much as I want, and I could just keep going until I feel like the audio clip just needs to end. You notice that in, like, the Payday 2 video when I was playing with my friends, I was a lot more lively and talkative, and even though there were cuts where, you know, silence would be, I think that, like, overall it's a very well put together video that, like, it just worked, you know? And it's one of the few videos that I think I'm, like, the proudest of. Sure, like, these last few Persona episodes have been great, and the speed paints have been alright, but, like, the Payday 2 video, and I think these previous two Persona 3 Reload videos, maybe, I think episodes 5, and I think this would be 6? I'm not sure, I can't count. Point is, it's like, these are the ones that I'm proudest of because I put a lot of effort into talking into, there's noise, there's actually good, like, cool stuff in it, honestly. It's informative, yet also funny at some points. And I've just been able to really... I've just been really able to enjoy these, and also, like, see these last few videos as, like, I think the pinnacle. Like, I'm getting better, you know? I think maybe next episode I'll do even better than this, which would be absolutely surprising. I will say, though, that I should definitely spend a bit more time on art in my free time, because, I mean, it's not great, and I could afford to get better at that. I will say, though, I mean, recording these videos is also a pretty good way to get better and learn about things, especially editing them in probably the world's worst editing software. Yeah, Microsoft Clipchamp is really not that fun. It's definitely not been great. Especially because, like, all the stuff that I want to do with videos, like, add, like, cooler transitions or filters or, you know, like, some of the original stuff that I wanted in, like, the first couple episodes for the sake of being there, literally just didn't work, even though they're free to use and good to use, but apparently my computer said no. Or the editing software, I don't know which one. But, as I was saying, I think I should spend more time on art, get better at that, because I still need to make a profile picture and a couple other quality of life things like an intro and an outro. And maybe I can dedicate some time to, like, making music for it, or at least finding out a way to get music for it, because I'm gonna be real, I don't think I want to make, like, I don't want to use, like, royalty-free music, because that's just, I don't know, it's always been kind of an uncomfortable territory for me, because, like, I know how it should work, where, like, hey, it's just royalty-free, you know, you can credit it, you could do whatever you want with it, you can have it, but at the same time, it's just like, I don't know, like, what if it doesn't go royalty-free? Like, what if it changes, you know, and then immediately, like, I'm in deep trouble, you know, I really don't want to end up that way. Moving on from that, the elderly bookstore couple, they have sent us on a weird quest to find the persimmon tree that's at the school courtyard. I noticed this tree first thing, and I love this tree. I don't know why. I think I have an emotional attachment to this tree. Is it weird? Definitely, but, like, it's a tree that exists, and I'm immediately just like, wow. I love this tree. I want to visit this tree, like, every day. That sort of thing. Then again, everyone gets their weird emotional attachments to just various things, either in real life or in games or in movies or whatever. I mean, you know, emotional attachment to a character is pretty obvious, but, like, sometimes it gets a little strange. Like, I have an emotional attachment to, I don't know, like, this deck of cards. I mean, that could actually have a really good reason for it. I shouldn't say that's weird. Really, there's a good reason for basically anything. Except for my emotional attachment to this tree. I don't understand why. Maybe it's because I just think, like, I've never actually had or seen a persimmon, or even a tree that, like, grew persimmons. So maybe because it's something new to me, I just naturally like it a lot more. I don't know.
Welcome to Bookworms. How many guests? Smoking or non-smoking? That leaf that's in your hand. Oh, do you mean to tell me this is a leaf from that persimmon tree? It must have grown quite a bit to produce such splendid leaves. Oh, wait, so you aren't here to buy books? Did you come visit just to show this to us? I knew it. I knew right from the start that you were a kind young man. I've been meaning to go see that tree for a while now, but I'm not sure if these stumpy old legs will make it that far. That wasn't meant to be a pun. You know, stumpy. Tree stump? Get it?
Yes, you're very clever, dear.
Let me introduce my wife, Mitsuko. I'm Bunkichi. If you don't mind, would you tell us your name? Yes, a good name. As good as mine.
I would die for this elderly couple. These are Bunkichi and Mitsuko. They are the elderly couple of the Hierophant Arcana. That's right, these two share an Arcana. Kaz, at least, you know, seems like he has the Chariot Arcana when it says track team, but it's mainly tied to Kaz. However, with this, now we have one that's two people just connected to one, which is really nice. As a quick refresher, the Hierophant Arcana mainly has these terms connected to it. Tradition, social groups, conventionality. Wait, conventionality? Is that? Huh, never had to pronounce that word before. That's crazy. Conformity, education, knowledge, and beliefs. As you saw, I'm not great. But yeah, now we'll actually figure out which of these terms apply to them, and how it develops over time. I actually really like having another social link for the books. It's mainly because what I want to do is do every single social link in the game to completion in one run. And I have a feeling it'd be difficult, but I really want to put a lot of effort into it and get things right. Especially for a first-time playthrough. I really don't like, going back and having to do things. I like the sort of 100% along the way. Especially in a game like this, because there's so much to see and so much to do, and it's just really enjoyable to do it all along the way, rather than going back and having to do everything again to eventually set yourself up for something. I want to be able to see it all. I feel like part of the gameplay experience in something is not to 100% something. You don't have to 100% something in order to feel content and never have to go back to it again. But part of the gameplay experience is being able to see just everything that you're able to. And really taking your time with things to truly enjoy what the game has to offer and see everything. Just for what it is and the deeper details, and I just believe that, seeing is there. It's a big part of why I like playing story-based games that take a really long time to complete, is because there's so much to see, and in some cases there's a lot you can do in those games. For example, doing homework for the first time ever. That's amazing. Wow, I finally did it. Another such example is being able to use your phone to get texts from people so that they can invite you out somewhere during your free time. I think it's a nice little touch, people actually reaching out to you just in-game to say, hey, do you want to hang out? As it kind of prompts you to go that direction, rather than forcing you to have to find them or do something else. I think in-game it actually works out really well. It just prompts the player to do that action first, or at least see the character as important. Just like this, where, Kenji prompted me, I accepted, and now I'm spending a free time event with him. I will say, though, I could have planned around this a bit better, and it's not a proper upgrade to the social link, but it's still worth it to do, because now I have a little bit of a headway on the next step of the social link. And like most parts of this game, there is internal math to it. So with social links, it's actually a points-based system. It depends on if you have a persona in your stock of the same arcana as the social link, as the social link. It also depends on your answer during questionnaires, it depends on, like, certain aspects, and it's kind of interesting that it works on a points-based system. It also depends, like, you know, what level persona you have as well. For example, like, if I were to say, like, Pixie, right, a part of the Lover's Arcana, that'd be kind of like the first step in a Lover's Arcana. However, if I had one that was, like, way later on, that would actually help with a social link that happens way later on. Like, I'm talking like a level 8 Lover's social link. To answer Kenji's question realistically here when it comes to preference on food, I absolutely despise eggs, but that's if, like, they're on their own or a major part of something. If they're baked into something, it's fine. One of my problems with food is the authenticity of it. So, processed food, like extremely processed fast food, it is, to me, it's just a means to get to feel full. It's just nothing. It means nothing to me. And overall, eating is, like, a very weird process for me. However, if something is authentic enough, like, I'm talking, like, a really good raised farm animal that, you know, got turned into a nice, like, steak or something, like a nice cow to a steak, or crops that were grown in the area, or, like, fresh milk or something, you know. The authenticity of it, like, of if it's around that area, if it's made correctly, if it's not from, like, an assembly line, like, I really love eating that food. That doesn't mean, like, I hate candy or processed food, it's just, like, I can eat it, and same with soda, but, like, that's mainly because I'm addicted to sugar, so, you know. But yeah, like, if a food feels authentic to me, and it is, like, I'm enjoying it. That's the only time that I really enjoy food. I think for now, though, I'm gonna end off this episode here. It's gonna take me a while to get more, footage, because I just need to make another, recording session. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video, and, well, I mean, just have a great day, enjoy yourself. See you later.